safety stool's got 3 legs and it sits on top of the environment. This is the internal part of us. And each leg, the first leg is control and orientation. So that's our ability to scan the environment, see what's going on and make sense of it. It's our ability to control what's going on. The next leg is pain or pleasure. So this is our brain has this strong desire to always seek pleasure and avoid pain. And so we make decisions through this paradigm, whether we realize it or not all the time. And sometimes there are things that are blocking us from seeking pleasure, and we're always trying to avoid pain, but we can use this the wrong way. Drugs and alcohol is a great example of seeking pleasure to avoid pain. The third leg is attachment. And this is really related to the connections that we have built with significant people in our lives. Often you hear you just need one significant person in your life. Well, I actually argue differently that we need at least 5 significant people. We need to have a list and a group of people, because what happens if on the day you need to talk to that one person, they're sick?
Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Well, welcome everybody. I am so excited to have Bernii Godwin joining us for this summer series where she's going to share some amazing insights and tips from her amazing book called Loving Our Students on Purpose, which might sound a little bit strange because I must say when I first saw the title, but once you hear what Bernie's got to say, you're going to be absolutely inspired. I'm really hoping this podcast, as it's part of the summer series, is a chance to reflect on who you want to be as a teacher or educator, what you can do differently in the new year. I mean, this is a great time if you're out on a walk or on the treadmill or even cleaning to sort of take a moment to reflect on who you want to be as a teacher or an educator and what you can do differently. Because what Bernie's going to share is that she really wants to equip schools with the practical tools to increase student engagement, which is what I'm all about, and also that positive behaviour management and skills. But I sort of reading the book, the way I describe it is nearly bringing joy back to teaching. Would that be where it comes from, Bernii?
Yeah, I think that's the essence and the heart of loving our students on purpose, is when we enjoy what we do and we know our purpose and why, then that's going to flow over to our students.
Fantastic. So tell us, why did you write the book then?
So Loving Our Students on Purpose developed over about 5 years. I'd been working in the behaviour education space for the last 20 years, doing all different roles. And I came to the realization that the tools that were available to teachers just weren't enough. And that most of the people I was working with wanted more. And with all the questions that they had for me, I thought, let's write it down and pass it on. And so Loving Our Students on Purpose comes out of a book initially written by Danny Silk called Loving Our Kids on Purpose, which is a parenting program. And as a parenting course, I had integrated that into my practice with students. And as a result, the staff had started to come and ask lots of questions about why the students who were coming to me to solve behaviour and wellbeing issues that were occurring in the classroom and the playground were actually having success. And they were returning to class happy and wanting to learn, which was different to usual processes of, student behaviour in the classroom. And so I started to adapt Loving Our Kids on Purpose into Loving Our Students on Purpose and put the framework of education over the process, and then expand it to include all the recent neuroscience that's going around, because that's part of my background as well.
Yeah. So I love that, because your background's in social work and applied neuroscience, is it?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So listening to you say that, so what would be some of the things that you were applying from the book that made a difference to children's learning?
I think a huge part of the practice of loving our students on purpose is having intentionality about how I manage myself, no matter what they're doing in front of me. And so as I got more proficient at managing myself, my own self-soothing, my own recognition of what's going on inside of me, I was able to set some pretty clear boundaries with students to help them to start to do that process as well. So we moved past object regulation and then into some co-regulation and started to develop skills with the students in self-regulation. And I think that 3-part process is a really important one that we're working through to develop with students on the journey. But it actually started with me, and I needed to learn the skills to do this well myself. So we use the term a powerful teacher, and a powerful teacher always chooses connection. They restore relationship, That's their goal in everything that they do. And they're always looking to manage themselves no matter what's happening in front of them, so that they're no longer taken by surprise. Students are going to talk in class. Students are going to, do things in the playground we wish they wouldn't. To be fair, staff do those things too. So it's largely around focusing on what is my powerful person journey and how do I become a powerful teacher who can then inspire my kids to be powerful as well.
Wow. So I imagine someone's listening in and this is all new to them. What are some things they can do to create that inner calm?
One of the first tips, and I call it my secret weapon that I came across, came from the book Love and Logic by Jim Fay and Foster Cline, and it was the one-liners. So it was learning a set of phrases that I could use to stop arguments or complaining or anything that the kids were throwing at me, so I could continue to manage me and self-regulate. And those one-liners, there's 5 phrases. I tell my staff, just get them tattooed down your arm because you're going to want to remember them. And it's, I know, probably so, I don't know, that may be, nice try.
So
and it's just
funny.
So easy.
It's so funny you say that, because I had that bookmark. So it's on page 165 of the book, and I did bookmark that myself. And I know people listening, so they can't see the visual, but you can see there the one line. So we'll go through them again. I know. How would I use that? I know.
So in a context, maybe the student says to you, Miss, what time is lunch? And you go, I don't know. And of course you know, probably so. But lunch is in 10 minutes. I know. You know it's in 10 minutes. Can I go out early to lunch? Nice try. And so very quickly, instead of being caught up into an argument, you're just using some phrases to move the conversation along and get the student back onto what they needed to do. And students will say things like, oh, you're no fun. I know. And kids say to the parents, I hate you. Probably so, but I love you. Yeah. And so it's just not getting caught into the dynamic where there's 2 people attacking each other or trying to over-explain and lecture to each other, and it just eases the tension.
Yeah, because the other thing I bookmarked, which is earlier in the book on page 19, was about how we never thought as teachers we would be Mr. Strict or Miss Get out of my class, how all of us thought we were never going to say that. And I can say as a parent, I often think I've been possessed by my own mother. Like I say things and I go, I was never going to say that as a parent.
Right.
And I catch myself. I go, not that I don't love my parents for everything they did and didn't do, but sometimes there were things as a child I thought, I'm not going to say that. But I catch myself doing that. So
yes, and it's under stress. That mum or dad or our teacher will jump out of our mouth and start parenting or teaching the class for us. And if we don't recognize when we're under that sort of pressure and stress and have a quick go-to tool, then that's when that can happen really easily.
100%. So what you're talking about with the phrases is, for many of my neurodiverse students, I when people do my training, I talk about being a GPS. That a GPS doesn't react if you swear at it or you make a mistake. A GPS just stays calm, redirects, concise, doesn't have any emotion, doesn't get involved. Because I think one of the misunderstandings about our diverse students is that so many of them actually have double empathy. So they twice pick up on your emotions and they don't always know what to do with it. So the worst thing you can do is heighten. As soon as you get a bit pitchy, then that can cause a sensory issue. But as soon as you heighten your own emotions, the child will co-regulate with your emotions. So learning to calm yourself, and I often say, go and get the sensory tool yourself. Go and sit in the tent for a minute, whatever. Sometimes you've got to calm yourself so you don't, as you say, go into those old patterns of
couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I think what I love about using Loving Our Students on Purpose, in all the schools that I've worked with, the learning needs always are correlated to behavior needs, and behavior needs are always correlated to learning needs. It's the chicken and the egg. They both can come out at different points, but they're always connected. And so this book, particularly when I've been working with students with behavior needs, so often the students with the learning needs have just thrived by the predictable pattern and sequence of the way that we respond to them. And when we become predictable, they can predict that we will stay calm, that we're going to always respond in a certain way, that we're going to have this presence about us. They're more likely to come and ask for help, but they're also more likely to access some really great thinking processes for themselves.
Yeah. So the first stage is us being calm. And then what was the second stage again?
Ooh.
The second phase was that pursuing connection. So how do I build that connection with students?
Yeah, we refer to it as our primary goal is to maintain connection with our students. And I think of it a lot like a rope connection. If I have a nice, strong connection with a student and I'm holding my end of the rope and they're holding their end of the rope, and I'm constantly building that through, we can speak their love language, we can spend time getting to know them, we can come alongside them and know their hopes and dreams. We're listening with the intent to hear them and know them, not to tell them what to do. I'm strengthening that connection, and those fibers in the rope are really strong. And then when I need to withdraw something, I need to ask something from that student, there's something I can pull on. And I can say, hey, come with me. Do you mind just moving and sitting over here? And they're going to move, or they're going to do what you ask, because there's that strength. But where we're not building up the strength, what happens is it deteriorates and our connection becomes like a tissue. And if I'm holding the end of a tissue and I've barely got connection and the student's holding their end of the tissue and I say, come with me, that tissue is going to rip in half. And I've got nothing to ask from them. And so often, I think we don't realize how important it is that we need to be building up those connections. And when we make a withdrawal, to rebuild up and having a nice, strong connection. If that's got to be our goal before we can ask anything of the student and ask them to take responsibility or ownership, they're watching us and our connection. And that's how they're going to know that they can trust us.
100%. And you mentioned the languages of love, and that was another thing that I'd bookmarked in here, the sort of 5 languages of love in the chapter 7, Love in the Classroom. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, can you just give them like a quick summary of what that is?
Yeah, the love languages come from Gary Chapman, and it's 5 different ways that we can include love, create a sense of relational connection with our students. Often we think of it as marriage love or friendship love, but actually love with our students is super important as well. Not one teacher out there went to university and thought, I'm not going to love, Tommy when I go to my first class. But we don't even know who our students are going to be. So we're going to love them long before we meet them. For many of us, we loved them before they were born. And then we come to class and we're like, oh my gosh, do I still love you today? And so we talk about choosing connection every day. So the love languages are quality time, acts of service, words of affirmation, physical touch, and
Gifts.
Gifts, of course, gifts.
I was just going through them in my head because I think they're really, when I first heard them, I remember finding them incredibly powerful to understand different relationships in my own life,
Exactly. And I think people forget, you can do these in different ways with students. Physical touch is one that everyone loves to point out. How can you do physical touch with students? And physical touch is actually more about being in physical proximity than necessary touch. And so, giving a student opportunity to sit on your teacher's chair, that is a form of physical touch for some students. We had one student in prep, he was 4, ASD, very dysregulated when he came to school, and he wanted hugs all the time. So what we did for him is we bought him this big fluffy blanket and we called it his hug. And anytime he wanted a hug from somebody on our team, all he had to do was get his blanket and wrap it tight around himself and hug himself. And suddenly he no longer came up to the behavior room for support because he was getting that physical touch need. Some students come up with what they call the hand hug. I think actually the Kardashians might have come up with it, where you put your hands together and your 2 outside fingers just hug each other.
Oh,
right? There's so many different ways. It doesn't have to be knuckles every single time. There's just sitting beside a student and pointing at the same thing that they're looking at. We're creating an experience of physical touch. And those things for those students can create really strong bonds because they're feeling seen and known. Yeah. So really important.
Yeah, I remember on Facebook once I think it was a special education teacher who would stand at the door, and every morning he had a special handshake for each student. Yes. And that individual connection, remembering each handshake, I even say just remembering a student's name, that can be an act. Like some of our kids don't hear their names very often. They don't have friends or connection, and often the adults are the connection, and that, the power of someone knowing your name cannot be underestimated. Yeah.
Yeah. And saying your name correctly. Yes. I think that's a huge one with kids.
Massive. Yes. In fact, anyway, I won't go off topic because I was just at a meeting recently where there was someone who really wasn't making the effort to get the name right, even though the parent corrected them many times, and you just can't have that. It's just like that is so important. But it's also connection with the parent. If you say the child's name incorrectly, that's all got to work together. Yeah, I love that.
Parents want to know that you cherish their child as much as you.
Yeah.
So all of our behavior education should be guided towards how do I show this child and this parent that I love having them in my classroom, that I love having this time with them, and that I cherish them and I want to see them succeed.
Yeah, 100%. And look, to be honest, that's one of my biggest problems because I love all my students. I cry at the end of the year. I'm a very emotional teacher, and I'm not like don't mean one of my problems, but sometimes when other people don't love the children as much as me, I don't understand because I'm like, but I love that kid. I don't care he told me to F off. At least he was talking to me. Like, and that's a little bit of my bias, my own bias.
Yeah, and it's good that we know what our bias is because we actually all do have one.
Yeah, and sometimes I forget other people mightn't have the same affection for neurodiverse children as me, and that, in fact, you know, that's my absolute passion. I have to remind myself that not everyone finds that as easy and intuitive, because I think for me, the more confident you get, the more intuitive it gets, whereas for some people it might be their first experience of because some students are hard to connect with. They've built up, you know, trauma background or whatever, built up big walls, and it can take time and, you know, those small steps forward. And some of my students, you feel like you're getting somewhere and then you go a step back, and that's okay. It's not like neurotypical children that they're going to instantly give you feedback and consistently give you that feedback. So yeah.
You're actually touching on something that I talk about in the book, which is the 13-year journey.
Ooh.
And I think that's really important for teachers to get a bigger picture of the influence that they're having. They might have a student for 1 year, but it's a part of a 13-year journey. And so the piece that we play doesn't always have an outcome. But if we added up all the pieces that all the teachers play together, then we have a symphony. And so the student might not show, you know, the progress, you know, that you're doing in grade 2 until it comes out of their mouth in grade 9, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And so being able to go above just yourself into the bigger picture, this is a journey that we're all carrying this child for 13 years, and that might include multiple teachers and schools and countries for some kids. That is the bigger picture, that we're all in this together as one team.
That makes me teary because especially at the end of the year, I get a lot of emails from parents or photos of kids graduating who I maybe knew in year 2 or year 3. And you're so right. I love hearing from parents like, yay, we made it through the 13 years. Because I probably met them at a stressful time where their child might have been suspended, expelled, excluded, wanting to know whether they should move schools. Like often my connection starts at a time that parents are feeling quite desperate, honestly, and the child often is disengaged. So I love when we get to the other end and I get that photo, or, you know, even I bumped into a mum once in Audi who I'd encouraged her son to move to TAFE because it just wasn't working. They tried lots of things. And like, you know, she gave me a big hug like a long lost friend, and it just warmed my heart because what that move had been so powerful. And sometimes I personally see myself as the advocate for the child because the parents are so caught up in making the right decisions, and there isn't. But you're right, that it's a 13-year journey. I love that. Now, I know you dedicated the book to Elijah. Is that how I say? Isaiah. Okay. Yes. So can you tell us, because I just love that, and I wish I'd dedicated my first book to Michael, who was my first student, and I saw that and I'm like, you're a wise woman. You dedicated it to a student. So tell us about it.
Well, he is a student. He's currently a student. Isaiah is actually my stepson, and he came into my life only just as the book was being published. And at the time I was thinking, like, who would I dedicate it to? And if I ever had a student that I ever worked with who I wanted every single teacher that he had to be a powerful teacher, it would be Isaiah. And so following his journey through school, he's currently in grade 2, and, you know, we're just watching him work out some really complex life, you know, transitions, because he moves between 2 homes. He's, you know, there's lots of complexities, and he doesn't, you know, he's not the role model student. He's got all sorts of things that are impacting him. And so my thought was, I'm dedicating it to him. He loves it. He came to me this year in grade 2 and he said, can I take a copy of your book to my teacher? And I was like, okay, like seemed a bit awkward, but he took it in and he gave his teacher, see, it's for me. You're going to be this teacher for me. And then just recently, 2 weekends ago, he went to his old school because he's transitioned schools, and he was at a disco, And this teacher, he doesn't know who she was, came up and went, "Oh, you're the student that Loving Our Students on Purpose was written for." And he was so
Oh,
excited to come home and say, "Oh, somebody has your book at my old school." And it's like, that's so fun.
oh,
So he's both my favorite student and my favorite son, and it's been a delight to work alongside him. And I've worked with other people's children for 20 years, and to have a little treasure of my own that I can help through some formative years is quite exciting as well.
I love it. I love it. That is gorgeous. So I love that. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the safety stool. I like that concept. So people who have the book on page 81, there's a lovely visual and some info. Can you share with people about the concept of the safety stool?
The safety stool actually came from a research project that I was doing when I did my certificate in applied neuroscience. And it was based on the integrated model of the base elements of the theory of neuropsychotherapy. Just the title alone, so complicated. And if you see the model, it's in the book. It's very complicated to try and understand. And I wanted to create something that was really simple that I could even use with students. And this is a model that I have actually walked students through many times to make it simple enough that they could understand the process. So I used the concept of a stool, a three-legged stool that sat atop the ground, which has some grass. So in the ground, we have genetics. This is our DNA. These are the things that we can't really change about ourselves. They just are. And this might be, who our parents are. You can't change your height, your eye color. Maybe there's some blood issues. Whatever's going on for you, it's in your genetics and your DNA. Then we've got the grass level. This is our environment. So this might be your school, it might be your home, your workplace, your general community, your social media. It's the environment in which we interact. So those things are outside of ourselves, they're external. The safety stool's got three legs and it sits on top of the environment. This is the internal part of us. And each leg, the first leg is control and orientation. So that's our ability to scan the environment, see what's going on and make sense of it. It's our ability to control what's going on. The next leg is pain or pleasure. So this is our brain has this strong desire to always seek pleasure and avoid pain. And so we make decisions through this paradigm, whether we realize it or not all the time. And sometimes there are things that are blocking us from seeking pleasure, and we're always trying to avoid pain, but we can use this the wrong way. Drugs and alcohol is a great example of seeking pleasure to avoid pain. The third leg is attachment. And this is really related to the connections that we have built with significant people in our lives. Often you hear you just need one significant person in your life. Well, I actually argue differently that we need at least 5 significant people. We need to have a list and a group of people, because what happens if on the day you need to talk to that one person, they're sick or they're unavailable, or like today, the whole of Optus has gone down and you can't contact them. And so building significant attachments is super important to have more than one person. Atop these 3 legs is our sense of self. And that is how we how we make sense of who we are, how we are managing ourselves well. And what happens is one of these legs is not strong. Maybe, somebody's cut it off because you've suddenly moved schools, so you have no sense of orientation. You go to your new school and you're scanning the environment and there's no familiar faces. You don't know where to go. Suddenly your stool gets very wobbly. And that seat at the top of the stool is starting to wobble. It's maybe even falling over. And maybe on our first day, we get called out by a teacher and we feel very ashamed in front of the class because we didn't know the answer to something. And so, our pain pleasure leg gets cut off a little bit. And so now we're really wobbly. And our attachments, well, we've already lost all our friends, all our familiar teachers from our previous school. Yes, we can contact them, but they're not there on that day when you needed to talk to them. So that whole experience from changing an environment, the school that you went to, can have a very big impact. But then you add genetics. What if the student is not neurotypical? What if the student has some sort of condition that they don't want to let their teachers know about? Or what if they simply are concerned that somebody will find out that their parents are divorced and they don't want people to know that? So there's more impacting that environment. And what can happen in schools is a big sudden change is like an earthquake. And so we might be actually very secure in ourselves and our stool legs are nice and strong. We've been building that up. But a sudden change in our school environment or our home environment can cause a massive earthquake. And when our sense of self gets wobbly, a lot of behaviors can come out because we don't have words for it, or we don't have the emotional language to say what's going on. And so we might actually start acting our behaviors. And so when we can use this safety stool, we can actually then figure out what it is that's missing for the student, which leg needs to be strengthened, or is it an environmental issue, and help them restore their sense of self. So it's not that it doesn't get wobbly, it's that we know what to do when we are feeling wobbly.
Yeah, I think I love that. And I love the example of a child moving schools because I've just done my webinar getting ready for next year. And so often schools say to me, oh, it's too early. It's like, no, because some of my kids need a lot of information. And, I always say, keep the teacher assistant for the first few weeks so they haven't got two new adults in the room. They've got one familiar face, and because many of my neurodiverse students don't necessarily have strong friendships and connections. So they might need that adult to be that secure self in the room. And, so I love what you're talking about. And I'd love people to really reflect on that. And it is one of my biggest struggles when I say to schools, this student needs to know their teacher for next year. The others might be able to adapt. Like they can rewrite their stool quicker, can't they? And a diverse student's going to take longer to actually get that wobble. So you're going to get a lot of behavior, and also why you've got to set it up nice and early and have in place. Like a lot of my students thrive on routine, repetition, setting up that at the start of the year. Because once the child's calm, I can actually bring in more change and move things around. But it's just getting that stool stable in your analogy.
And that's where social stories are so powerful. Being able to set social stories up so that they can be looking at them throughout the Christmas holidays in preparation. A lot of people think of term 4 as the celebration term. It's the end of everything, it's graduations, but actually on the flip side of celebration, it's the grief term. And a lot of the behaviors we see in term 4 are actually students repelling against they're preparing for losing their teacher or changing classes or the uncertainty. And there's a lot of grief behaviors, which becomes a mess pool of emotions that they can't differentiate. And we are so busy saying, you got to celebrate, that we're not taking time to see the grief. And for teachers, they're actually all grieving because so often they thought that they were going to be the savior that year. They would win with that child. And because it's not that simple, children take 13 years of schooling and then some to develop. Sometimes they can feel a lot of pressure on or sense of failure if they haven't reached a certain goal at a certain time. And so adults can actually push students away early, because they're preparing for transition. And when you think about it, there's 4 types of attachment. Only one is secure. So there's 75% of us in a school environment in term 4 who are using insecure attachment styles to cope with the change that's coming.
So true. So true. And, teaching's the only job in the world, really, that you get a whole new class. Every year is like a whole new job, unless you're keeping the class, right? And every year, whole new group of parents, whole new group of students, and that's why I say, why not prepare the teacher the year before? Like if you can, let them know who their class is, where their classroom's going to be. Let the kids all go there. So over the holidays, they have that visual and know what it's going to look like. And I don't just think it's for the neurodiverse kids. I think you're right. It's for the teacher, for the other students as well.
I mean, everyone benefits from that. Keeping in mind that school systems are so complex, most schools wouldn't necessarily have that clarity of information by the end of the year. Staff are still making decisions about, whether they're moving away because their spouse got a job or, whatever's going on. School holidays are the time where big, complex family dynamics change. That's where divorce can change or separation. And so it's hard sometimes for schools to have all that information. But if they have a process, even if they can't say exactly who, but they know where, they can eliminate some of the surprise. And then as soon as they know, they can send home, the package that says this is where you'll be. But that is a really great option. I work with one school that before the student enrolls at the school, they get a little book, and it's a social story, and it shows in the social story what uniform they will wear and when the bell times are, and it doesn't show them exactly the map and location or exactly their teacher, but it's got a beautiful overview from the beginning of the day the student arrives at school all the way through to parent pickup, and it could be used across multiple campuses. It's generic enough that it's the process, but it's not specific. And something like that could actually go a really long way in just helping all of our students to transition more successfully.
100%, because it takes out one of the uncertainties, like bell time. I always say, where are the students? Who do I go to for help? What's all those things? We're on the singing.
Those are all to do with orientation. Yes.
Exactly. Now, I'm conscious. I said to you that I could talk to you for an hour on this, and I'm just looking at my questions, go, oh, there's a few things I wanted to cover. One of the things you said in the book that I just wanted to dig a little bit into was the concept of saying to children, come back when you're ready to have fun with me, or something like that. Yeah.
Yes. So that actually it's a term that everyone picks up on. And it comes from loving our kids on purpose, which is why I kept that word fun or no fun. It's not necessarily referring to fun as in you need to be like throwing a party and it's really just saying come back when you're ready to engage with me in a way that's kind together. So we can have fun solving a problem, and kids understand fun. That it's as we become adults that word gets far more complex. But when you're talking to kids, especially preps and lower primary, fun makes sense. Like when you're ready, and I'll say to them, when you're ready to smile, if you're unclenching your hands so they're not in fists, when you're ready to look at the page with me and we could sit together, that's fun because I love sitting with you and connecting in that way. So I would usually walk a child through the process of my whole body, what fun looks like. What are my ears doing? What are my eyes doing? What is my mouth doing? What are my hands doing? I often use the Red Beast book to help them see the difference between unfun and fun, or escalator, de-escalator. It's just simple language built in for students. And so fun doesn't mean that they have to be denying what happened, that they're angry and that there's a conflict. Fun means we can work together and we're not seeing each other as the enemy, but we're actually now facing, instead of facing towards each other, we're standing side by side and looking out and solving the problem together.
Yeah, I love the fact you use the Red Beast book because I do too.
All the time.
And that's why, I don't know if you know, but I wrote a workbook with Kay.
I've got it, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, because I use it all the time. And so often, again, what you're saying about adult concept of fun, it's different to a child's concept of fun. It's like the Red Beast. People are often going to me, but do children realize that the Red Beast is there's like, see, that's an adult overlaying their perception.
Yes.
Yeah. Kids get it, and kids get it better than us because
so much.
Yeah, because I'll have kids go to me, oh, my Red Beast is coming out soon, and I'm like, oh, I thought so too. What made you think that? And it gives us a common language and conversation. Yes. Yeah. And it's so powerful, and I love it when kids like notice that, and it just gives them, like I say, like literacy, gives them emotional literacy. So I love the fact you use that. And I find kids access it in different ways. It's us as adults that see it differently sometimes. Yeah. So
I think you're very correct. We use adult logic to understand children where it's not always that simple. Yeah. I've created the Red Beast box. And so with other schools, but with my son, having a Red Beast box in the classroom of items and things that they can use to self-regulate is really important. And it's not about object regulation. We're not just going and playing with toys and distracting ourselves from the problem. What's the process is they have these objects that they've co-regulated. Someone's shown them how to use them well. And now we can withdraw our presence and they can keep using them to self-regulate. And that's where it becomes so helpful. My son will often go up to his room. I'll see him in there with his bubble wrap or his affirmation cards or whatever he's pulled out. And then he'll come back down and then we can talk about it. But it's not object regulation. I think so often we just put a phone in a child's hands. I mean, you see this at schools. Teachers and teacher aides just stick an iPod or a phone in the kids' hands. Like that is just a distraction from working through the emotion. But when we can give them some real tools that can help them self-regulate in the future, what's so important is kids then learn when they're older, when they're adults, they remember they co-regulated with someone at some point, and they're more likely to go and see a counselor or see a friend and ask for help in the future.
Yeah, I love that. Just back on what you're saying with technology. I always say technology puts children in a holding pattern. That's all it does. It puts them in holding. It doesn't make it go up or down. But when you then try and get the device off them, often you'll get the meltdown because the device hasn't actually helped them regulate. It's just put them in a holding pattern and not a good plan, because guaranteed when you try and get the device, then you're going to get the explosion. And that's why in the new Red Beast workbook, we've got things like squishing the squeeze ball 14 times, more intentional how to use the sensory tools. Like it's more intentional breathing and activities, and really saying to do it over 14 days. So it actually goes into the child's long-term memory to access that rather than just that one-off, which is all the stuff you studied and know so much more about me. I call myself a pracademic. I haven't done neuroscience, but I've worked with 3,000 kids who've taught me a lot about the brain.
Yeah. I think what I want to point out for the teachers listening is that, when you're given this box or tool of sensory tools, so often they can feel like they just distract the students. And it is a bugbear for teachers to have these things in the classroom and the kids are just not using them correctly. That's because they've been given as an object regulation and they haven't been taught how to use them correctly through co-regulation and then moved into self-regulation. And so if you can slow down the things that you're giving the students and teach your class together or that single student how to use that particular thing well to reach the goal of self-regulation and then introduce more, that can be a lot more effective. And then you can actually control the environment so that they can have access to those things, but they know how to use them respectfully and they won't become toys that just get thrown around the classroom and broken and distracted.
I always say they're like my glasses. When I have the right lenses, I use them appropriately. But if you gave me the glasses with the wrong script, I would be throwing them around and not using them purposefully. Bringing it back to what you said about the rug, like having that blanket as a hug, the child's going to be using that appropriately because
never once did he do it the wrong way.
And that's when I've got the right script in my glasses, I use them properly. But I got those sort of multifocal a few years ago because I've hit that age. They kept giving me headaches. Well, I wasn't going to use them. They weren't actually helping me and they really annoyed me and they were a waste of money. And yes, they were not a good toy. Yeah. But my glasses I have now actually help me focus, stay on task, much more engaged. So if we can get the right tools. Now, I did warn you I could talk to you for an hour and it wasn't meant to be that long. I just can't thank you enough for coming on and just giving people lots of ideas. I really would encourage them to get the book. It isn't a hard read. You can nearly pick it up and flick through it and get ideas. And I was saying to Bernii, I had it on the kitchen table this morning and my husband was going through, he's not even a teacher. And he's going, wow, this is great. Then he put all these extra notes for me. So I just want to thank you for, I saw this thing on Facebook and it said, there isn't a lack of, there isn't a lack of teachers. There is of trained teachers. There's a lack of trained teachers who want to teach. Mm-hmm. And I think if we want to keep teachers enjoying teaching, keeping more teachers available, even our retired teachers to be relief teachers. I mean, we haven't got enough relief teachers because retired teachers are retiring and over it. Instead of in the past, they would have retired and done 1 or 2 days a week. Yeah. And if we want to keep teachers engaged, we have to keep them loving the students. And all of the things in your book are what I think we all wanted to be when we became teachers, teacher assistants, educators. And I think if teachers are looking, how can they reignite that? This book could be a great way to really reflect on maybe what's not missing, what's missing, but what you can replace it with. Because I think a lot of us can identify the problems, but it's working, well, how do I make that different?
Yeah. That's what I hear the most from all the teachers that I go and do training at schools, and I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with heads of schools and principals. And the number one feedback is, you put into words what I've been wanting to do or what I am doing, but I couldn't explain. Yeah. And it just makes it really simple. You're right. It's a really easy read. And I say to my listeners all the time, just read chapter 1, 2, 6, and 11. It's the perfect chord. And if you don't read the rest, you'll still get the main message. So 1, 2, 6, and 11.
I've written that down.
You'll want to read the rest.
I'll put that in the notes so people remember rather than trying to rewind it. I hate it when people say things really fast on podcasts and I'm trying to go back 30 seconds. So I promise you it'll be in the top tips from the takeaways from the podcast so people know they're the things, and I'll have on the podcast notes where to get the book. But thank you for giving us your time and sharing your insights. And for anyone listening, thank you for listening and loving your students, because the fact you listen tells me you love your students and want more. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. That's great.
Pleasure. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.suelarkey.com.au.